Hello traders, welcome to the Nexoel Trading Hub YouTube channel. So we're going to be looking at the weekly forecast for the coming week, and we are starting from the dollar index. This is the monthly time frame. So we saw how price traded bearish to the downside into the monthly bullish fair value gap, and we saw the rejection after price took out this pool of sell side liquidity. What we can see in the chart is that the market created this monthly inversion fair value gap, and I told us to expect bullishness in the dollar index to trade into the monthly inversion fair value gap, and then we could see bearish rejection to the downside. So what we can see is that price traded to the low of the monthly inversion fair value gap, though price did not trade more into the consequent encroachments. So last week I was expecting the possibility of bullish movements to see how price would trade into the mean threshold before we have that strong bearish rejection to the downside. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. Price just respected the low here, and we had the bearish rejection to the downside. So let's check the weekly time frame. So here in the weekly time frame, if you've been following the weekly Forex forecast, you would know last 3 weeks I pointed to the fact that we have this weekly bearish fair value gap after price took out this pool of sell side liquidity resting here. We can see the weekly bearish fair value gap where I told us I want to see how price would trade back into that. And in a lower time frame within this weekly candle week, we saw the daily bearish fair value gap. So I said price may trade more higher, and then we have the bearish fall to the downside. So last week I was expecting the possibility that price may just give us more bullishness. That was wrong, and now what we can see is a strong bearish to the downside. But the past 3 weeks, I was expecting that we have bullishness into this, and price may trade more into this week, and the bearishness to the downside. And this is clearly the delivery we can see. So meaning price here respected the forecast we actually released 3 weeks ago, where we expected to see bearish reaction from this weekly bearish fair value gap. Last week I made a mistake of expecting to see the possibility that we may see bullishness to the upside, because I saw how price here was within this weekly bearish fair value gap. So I was expecting price may take out this weekly high before we have bearishness to the downside. But fortunately or unfortunately, price just traded bearish. So on a daily perspective, I saw the opportunity to leverage the bearishness and then go bullish in the USD pairs like the EURUSD, the GBPUSD pair. So for the coming week, I'm still expecting the bearish possibility to the downside. So we have a drawn out liquidity. We have the sell side. In extension, we have the sell side liquidity. So let's check the daily time frame. So here in the daily time frame, what we can clearly see is the daily bearish fair value gap, the liquidity gap here. We can see price filled that up, and we have the bearishness to the downside. So what we can see here, we have sell side liquidity resting here, sell side liquidity resting here. Price fell to the downside. What we can see is that price is not respecting this bullish order block. We can see how volume have traded below the close of this last bearish candle before this bullish movement to the upside. So I'm expecting to see the possibility that we may have price gives us this movement to the upside, and we have our bearish continuation to the downside in the dollar index. So let's check the 4-hour time frame. So here in the 4-hour time frame, what we can see in the 4-hour time frame is this is the daily bearish order block. We can see here we have this fair value gap here in the 4-hour time frame, and we have price swept this sell side liquidity. So if we do not have a continuous bearishness to the downside and price decides to trade to the upside before continuing bearish, then I'll be looking at how price reacts at this zone, the sell model that price would give us here, and I'll be bearish to the downside in the dollar index, looking forward to see how price would take out this sell side liquidity resting here. So clearly I have this zone marked out, this 4-hour bearish fair value gap, which is within the daily bearish order block. So I would like to see how price will trade into that. If price gives us a clear sell model, then I'm bearish to the downside. But when we have price possibly just straight to the downside when market opens and price just gives bearish continuation to the downside, we may see price reaction at this bullish fair value gap, and price may give a pullback. If price creates a supply zone, then that supply zone will be where we'll be looking forward to see a sell model, and then we continue bearish to the downside. So this is what I have to show you guys in the dollar index. So let's check out the Euro USD pair. I'm not going to the 1 hour time frame. I'll just stop here in the 4-hour time frame. When it comes to the daily narrative, then I'll be looking at other lower time frames for my trade executions. So let's head to the Euro USD pair. This is Euro USD, and this is a monthly time frame of the Euro USD. So we can see we had this monthly bullish fair value gap, which we were finding the weekly time frame, and we expected to see how price was going to react there and give us our bullish possibilities. We're looking forward to the buy side liquidity, just the way in the dollar index we're looking to the sell side liquidity. So if you've been following us, then you've really been leveraging the weekly Forex forecast information to make your trading decisions. So what we can see is the price violated this bearish order block. We can see how volume traded above that, taking out the buy side liquidity. So we can see how price returned to the downside. The bearish order block reclaimed price, and now we're seeing the rejection to the upside. So let's check the weekly time frame. So here in the weekly time frame, last 3 weeks when we had price traded into our institutional order flow here, after taking the relatively equal highs we had here, the buy side liquidity, I told us to expect bearishness to the downside into this weekly bullish fair value gap, and we can see our words bullish continuation to the upside, aiming at seeing how price again will further take out this high. But for last week, I was expecting the possibility that price may trade more lower, more bearish to the downside to this key level, the open close price of those candles, and then we have the bullishness to the upside. So what we can see clearly is that price, after filling up the weekly bullish fair value gap, we had that strong bullish reaction, just the way we can see in the dollar index. After price filled up the weekly bearish fair value gap, we had bearish reaction to the downside. So for the coming week, I'm expecting to see bullish continuation to the upside in Euro USD, since we're also expecting the possibility of bearish continuation in the dollar index. So we can clearly see that we are bullish in the Euro USD. And all the trade setups are something we've been calling out in the forecast, how we expected to see price return to this inversion and the bullishness. I expected to see price face rejection here, return to the weekly bullish fair value gap, mitigate also the daily bullish fair value gap, which is within this candle week, and we have the bullish continuation to the upside. And clearly we can just see the delivery to the upside. So I'm expecting bullishness the coming week. So let's check the daily time frame. So here in the daily time frame, what we can clearly see is how price filled up the daily bullish fair value gap, and we start seeing this bullish reaction. Though last week I wanted to see price trade further to the downside before we have the bullish continuation, but clearly price just continued bullish after completely filling up the fair value gap we identified from the weekly time frame, and also the daily bullish fair value gap here. So clearly what we have now is that price created here this daily bullish order block. So we have the sell movement here to the downside that took out this previous daily candle liquidity here, the low, and we had this bullish impulse to the upside. So I'm expecting to see the possibility of how price would give us a return to mitigate this, and we have our bullish continuation to the upside, except price possibly decides to dip more lower to take out this sell side liquidity. But what we can see is, from dealing with the daily candle, this daily candle took out this previous daily candle low point, and what we can see is we have this bullish engulfing candle to the upside. Let's check the 4-hour time frame. So here in the 4-hour time frame, what we can clearly see from the 4-hour is this is the daily bullish order block marked from the daily time frame. And here in the 4-hour, we have this buy side liquidity, relatively equal high points, or these are actually equal high points. So we have drawn liquidity here to the upside. What we can see, we have this supply zone here, a zone we're anticipating to see how price would possibly trade to the upside into this bearish order block. So from the 4-hour time frame, what we can see within the daily bullish order block, we have this sell side liquidity here. And what we can see, we have this down close candle before this bullish movement. Though what we can see is that price swept the high, volume did not really close above that. So for us to have our bullish continuation, I'll be looking forward to see price may take out the buy side liquidity, and we may see bearishness to the downside to take out the sell side liquidity, mitigating this bullish order block. And we'll look forward to see how we have our bullish continuation to the upside. So this is my expectation in the Euro USD pair. So guys, let's check out the GBP USD pair. Yeah, in GBPUSD, you guys can remember I marked out this weekly bearish fair value gap where we looked at it as the zone we want to see after price takes out this external range liquidity, this buy side. We want to see rejection back into the internal range liquidity, which is this weekly bullish fair value gap. And we can clearly see how price took out the buy side liquidity and price traded back into the weekly bullish fair value gap, and we have the bullishness of price to the upside. So volume have closed above the weekly bearish fair value gap. So for the coming week, I'll be looking forward to this possibility of seeing price given a bearish reaction, and then we have a bullish continuation to the upside in the GBP USD pair. So let's check the daily time frame. Here in the daily time frame, what we can see clearly from the daily time frame is how price traded to the downside into the weekly bullish fair value gap, which I called our attention to 3 weeks ago, and I told us we should expect a bullish movement when price mitigates the weekly bullish fair value gap. Though last week I was expecting to see that price may possibly decide to dip more lower into this zone because we saw the delivery of this consolidation through Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So I was expecting the possibility that price may give a manipulation to mitigate the zone before the bullish movement of price to the upside. But fortunately, price just continued bullish when the market opened. So what we can see now is the weekly bearish fair value gap. Price volume have traded above it, so we may see bearish reaction. So I want to see a pullback before we continue bullish to the upside, where price will return to retest the weekly bearish fair value gap as an inversion fair value gap. So let's check the 4-hour time frame. In the 4-hour time frame, what we can clearly see from the 4-hour time frame is within the weekly bearish fair value gap, we can see in the 4-hour time frame that we have this bullish fair value gap. So within the weekly bearish, which is going to act as an inversion, we have this 4-hour bullish fair value gap. So if price is going to trade to the downside, we can clearly see that here we have relatively equal low points here in the 4-hour time frame. We can see the relatively equal low points here acting as sell side liquidity, and below that we have this bullish order block here, which price has the possibility of returning to mitigate before we have the bullish continuation. So basically in GBPUSD, I have two zones to look out for. The possibility that price may just return to this, and we have the bullish continuation. But you know, when you look at the pairs, GBPUSD has been exhibiting more impulse than the Euro USD. So price may give an impulsive movement to take out the sell side liquidity, mitigating this bullish order block, because what we can see, this bullish order block actually sponsored the movement that took out this high point, because we can see price swept this high before further sponsoring bullishness to the upside to break this high point, to give a valid break of this high points. So this is my expectation in GBPUSD. I'll be looking at the reaction of price at this bullish fair value gap, which is within the inversion fair value gap. If price gives a buy model in the 15-minute, 5-minute time frame, then we want to go bullish in the GBPUSD from this zone. But we could see the possibility that price may trade more lower into this bullish order block, and we have that bullish movement of price to the upside. And one thing you must understand is, if we see price just continues bullish, then we have to be looking at the new zones that the market will be forming. So that may render these zones invalid if price possibly continues bullish now, creating new zones. So this is what I have to show us in GBPUSD. Let's check out the USDJPY pair. So here in USDJPY, what we can see is price traded into the weekly bearish fair value gap, and we have this bearish rejection of price to the downside. We can see how volume is trading bearish to the downside. So we have price targeting sell side in extension this sell side. And when we look at it, we also have the support liquidity. We have pool of sell side liquidity resting here. And below that, we have this weekly bullish fair value gap. So on the long-term perspective, then we have the possibility of seeing further bearish movement to this zone. But looking at the most recent price delivery and the next possible drawn liquidity, we're looking at this sell side in extension the sell side. So we may have price face a little support at this candle wick here, which is going to act as a rejection block before we have the possibility of further continuous bearishness to the downside. So I'll be looking forward to see how price will pull back before we have the bearish continuation to the downside. So let's check the daily time frame. So here in the daily time frame, what we have in the daily time frame is this is where the institutions bought to the upside and trying to sponsor what bearish continuation to the downside. And we can see that price is about to violate this bullish order block because volume is strongly within this bullish order block. So we may see the coming week price may violate this. So in the USDJPY, I'm looking forward to see how price will trade into the zone, and we have the bearish continuation to the downside. Let's check the 4-hour time frame. So here in the 4-hour time frame, what we can see, I pointed out the fact that we should sell from this fair value gap zone, and we'll be looking forward to selling to the downside. This was something I forecasted 3 weeks ago when we started seeing how price was going bullish to the upside. We anticipated to see price would take out this high points here, this liquidity resting here because of the fair value gap we have here, and then we go bearish. So we can see that within the sponsorship zone where we have the up close candle before the bearish movement, we can see in the 4-hour time frame here we have this 4-hour bearish fair value gap. So in the USDJPY, we'll be looking at the possibility of seeing price gives us a sell model within this sponsorship zone. Then we can look forward to continuing bearish to the downside. So this is my expectation in USDJPY pair. So what we can see is this bullish order block. So we may see price gives us bullishness to the upside, and they'll be looking forward to sell model here to continue bearish to the downside in USDJPY. So let's head to the gold pair, and that brings us to the end of the forecast for the coming week. So here in gold, from the weekly time frame, we can see we have this weekly bullish fair value gap the price created, and we can see how price returned into that and dipped more lower into this weekly candle week, because in the lower time frame, the daily time frame, we're going to find a daily bullish fair value gap. So price mitigated that, and we have this bullishness of price to the upside. Now we can see that the market is aiming for the buy side liquidity. If you can remember, last week I told us to anticipate to go bullish in the gold pair into the supply zone we identify from the daily time frame, which we refine in the 4-hour time frame. And until we see a clean, clear sell model, we have no reason to sell gold but to maintain its bullish bias. So what we can see is that gold traded into this candle wick, which in the daily time frame we're going to see a daily bullish fair value gap, and we can see here is the weekly bullish fair value gap, and we can see bullish impulse. Gold is extremely bullish, so price is aiming for the buy side liquidity. Let's check the daily time frame. So here in the daily time frame, what we can see clearly is the daily bullish fair value gap where price mitigated, and we saw price side giving us the bullish reaction. So I told us to buy to this base zone, and until we see a sell model, we do not have a reason to want to sell gold but to maintain bullish bias to the upside. So what we can see, price traded to this base zone, this supply zone, gave a little bearish reaction, but then we had that bullish continuation. So we can clearly see that now here we have an inversion fair value gap here in the daily time frame. Price have violated this base zone because we have base drop that further took out the sell side liquidity. Now we can see price created this base rally aiming for the buy side liquidity, and in extension this all-time high. So what we can see is that price gave us this sell candle before the bullish movement. So the institutions sold here before continuing bullish. They took price lower before further sponsoring bullish movement of price to the upside, so creating this institutional candle here. So we'll be looking at the possibility of bullish movements from this price zone. So clearly what I mean is we'll be looking at the possibility to see a pullback, and if price gives us a clean, clear buy model in lower time frame, then we want to continue bullish from this base zone. And what we can see is that price took out this daily candle low point, the sell side liquidity. So except price possibly decides to return to mitigate this inversion fair value gap, because in confluence we have a bullish fair value gap here in the daily time frame, taking out the sell side liquidity before we have the bullish continuation to the upside. So basically it means I have to look at the reaction at this zone, and if price seems to violate this zone, then the next zone we have is to look at how price will want to buy from this inversion fair value gap, and then we have bullishness to the upside. So let's check that in the 4-hour time frame. So what we can see in the 4-hour time frame here is how we have price mitigated the daily bullish fair value gap, pushed to the upside, returned back into the weekly, and we can see how price respected that, respecting also the consequent encroachment and bullish movement of price to the upside. So we had this low here created this high and a pullback, and now price creating this high points. So this is the low point, this is the origin, because the movement that took out this high began from this low point. So these are our internal structure within this range from this low to this high point. So we can see the 4-hour bearish fair value gap where price traded into. Price wanted to respect the supply zone we have here, but anyway, price still further went and violated that. So we can see price return gave bearishness, taking out this sell side liquidity, and price continued bullish to the upside. So this movement now gave us a valid violation of this supply zone. So we can see now what we have. This is the daily inversion, but now when we look at it, is the 4-hour bearish fair value gap is this. So price traded through that, returned back to retest that as a support, and we can see bullish movement of price to the upside. So from the 4-hour time frame to what we can see is price here took out this low point, sell side liquidity. We have this last down close candle before the bullish movement that took out this high. So I'm looking forward to see how price drops into this zone. If price gives us a buy model from this zone, then we want to continue bullish to the upside, except price decides to want to seek this low points as a sell side liquidity before continuing bullish to mitigate the daily inversion fair value gap, because we also have this bullish fair value gaps below that zone. So this is what I have to show us in the gold pair. So it means I'll be looking at this level, and in extension we could see price drop into this, and we have the bullishness to the upside. So I just had to point out the two zones for you guys. So this is all I have to show us for the gold pair, and this is all I have to show us for the forecast for the coming week. So until I come your way again, God bless you and cheers.